Hello and welcome to the Empress podcast. I am your host, Jessica, known in the online space as Jess the Empress. I started this podcast to help you be present with yourself, cope with chaos, and simplify your life. I do this by combining psychology, behavioral science, and the tarot. I have a background in mental health, specifically a master's in clinical social work from USC, and I'm a professional tarot reader. So get ready to have a nurturing, creative, and empowering experience with me as we use practical magic. Hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to the pod. It's your girl, Jess. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to hang out with me as we get into the September podcast. So the title of this month is Earth Mother Energy, Nurturing Without Depleting Yourself. The card I pulled for the month ahead is the Queen of Pentacles. When I get this card, I get really excited because I know that she's asking me to think about things differently, change some things in my life, but it's from this place of care and consideration. And really, she brings a compassionate energy into my life and obviously into your life anytime you pull her. I did do a little something different for this episode. I pulled more than one card, and you'll see how those other cards and what they are. You'll see how they factor into the overall reading for this month. But for right now, we're just going to focus on the Queen of Pentacles. I have a couple of books that I go to for tarot. And when I was doing my deep dive in the very beginning, I would make so many notes in the margins. There's highlights, there's underline, there's tons of marks in these books. So the first book is Jessica Doerr's Tarot for Change. And I really like what she says about the Queen of Pentacles. So she does define the pentacle as having external value, right? We can think about that as like money. We can think about it as career, material goods. But there are also internal values placed in the pentacle energy. So the Queen of Pentacles, there's this woman, right? And she knows what she's worth and she acts accordingly. Even though the queen is sitting down on her throne in this card, action is actually a huge part of the message here. And how that ties into the theme, right? Nurturing without depleting yourself. It's really important that we think about the ways that we've been conditioned by today's world to rush around, to overconsume, to self-sabotage, self-abandon. We are constantly pushed towards burnout and overwhelm. We're constantly told, whether outright or subtly, to give everything. I can't speak for men, but I can speak for women. Obviously not all women, but the majority of women, particularly the ones that are my clients, they really resonate with this message. The one where they've been told that they have to burn out in order to really prove themselves. And that, burnout is somehow virtuous. It's actually looked at as you're being an amazing mom or you're being an amazing employee or whatever. But the queen teaches us something revolutionary. She teaches us that true abundance, it comes from knowing how to preserve our resources and value our energy rather than depleting it. So her message is quite the opposite of what we see in society today. She represents our capacity for what psychologists will call a secure attachment. And that means having a really unshakable sense of being okay in our own skin, in our own body, and of being able to provide for ourselves without losing ourselves in the process and without losing ourselves to other people. This is huge. So when you pull her in your own reading or when you see her in a reading, I want you to really let that sink in. She's asking all of us this month to nurture ourselves, to nurture the world around us and the people around us, but not to lose ourselves, to find a better balance. And I'll tell you how to do that as we go further into the episode. But of course, I'm going to tie things into the mental health journey because that's what I do. So, one of the things you also want to know about the Queen of Pentacles is that she has a lot of somatic intelligence. She lives in her body and she trusts her gut. She knows that wisdom doesn't just sit in the mind alone, it's an embodied feeling. And when we're in a trauma informed therapy space, we know that healing happens when we reconnect with our body's inherent wisdom. So we're not just staying in our head, we're not just staying above the neck, so to speak. We're in a full body experience with what it is that we're living through or living in. I recently heard Gabor Mate share his insight on knowing when to trust your gut. I thought it was really insightful. I actually have a link in the show notes that you can click and it will bring up the clip where he goes into it, but I'll just give you a snippet of what he said. So he distinguishes the difference between intuition and anxiousness by saying that intuition is actually it's not anxiety and it's not self-doubt. So when you are feeling those emotions, when you're feeling self-doubt and when you're feeling anxiety, those are the emotional dynamics based on confusion and trauma. On a body level, you'll know the difference by what you experience internally. He actually references Eckhart Tolle's wisdom on this topic, and he says that emotions are the body's reaction to the mind, and a gut feeling are the body's reactions to the external environment. It just reminded me so much of the Queen of Pentacles. She's very comfortable in her environment. Like she's outdoors, not to say that you need to be, but in a sense that she's in nature and she's grounded. That's pretty much the perspective that she's giving us. So, getting grounded and feeling safe in our body, feeling comfortable to be maybe out in the open is important. And so, this month, we're exploring how to embody this queen's energy while facing the shadow of another card that I drew. And it's the King of Pentacles, but it's in the reverse position. So we have this really interesting oppositional energy here. So when we have the King of Pentacles reversed or inverted, that's the part of us that hoards and controls or operates from scarcity. Ultimately, this entire journey is going to lead us into the Six of Wands. This is a victory, which is great. I love to see it, but it's not about, conquering other people. It is more about conquering our own limiting beliefs about worthiness and abundance. And I'm not going to talk about the more general things I see talked about in the space of worthiness and abundance, meaning like you're going to get everything your heart desires, you're worthy of that. Abundance flows to you nonstop. Like I love all those phrases. I think they're great. I also want to, again, in the theme of this month, be as grounded as possible and give you something that's a little more, digestible instead of these larger, more grandiose statements. I want to give you something that you can really chew on and work with. To help you do that, I'm going to tell you a little story. We're going to have this girl named Emily. You know her, you've seen her. Emily is exhausted, okay? But she's giving everything to her family, her job, and her parents. She's the one everybody turns to, the reliable one, the one who always has it all together. And on the surface, she might look like what you would think of when you see the Queen of Pentacles. She's nurturing, she's abundant, she's caring for everybody, but underneath, she's running on empty. She'll give her last dollar, her last moment of rest, and her last ounce of energy to anybody who needs it. And this is the thing. Emily thinks that when she does this, this is what makes her a good person. She thinks that this is what love is supposed to look like. Picture Emily in your mind. Picture her shuffling a tarot card deck, and then out flies the Queen of Pentacles in her reading. If she were to come to me and if she were my client, I would ask her to really look at that card. In the Rider-Waite deck, the Queen, she sits on her throne. As I mentioned, she's surrounded by this lush garden, she's outdoors, and she's holding a pentacle in her lap. She's looking at it. She's not really grasping it, not holding it on tight. She's also not giving it away to anybody. She's simply holding it. She's very present with it. Next, I would ask Emily, when was the last time that you held your own energy like that? Not spending it, not hoarding it, but just being with yourself and being with your own energy. So that's the question I'm asking all of you this month as well. And, myself. So many of us, we don't have the encouragement to just be with our energy. Instead, we're conditioned to give it away or to hold it really close in a way that makes us actually really selfish. Again, think about that King of Pentacles in the reverse position. All of us have a shadow, and when we're looking at the King of Pentacles reversed, it's so important that we go beyond just the material greed and think about it similarly to the way that we look at the Queen of Pentacles, in that the pentacle itself can be about emotional hoarding. It can be about hoarding responsibility. It can be about hoarding the need to be needed. Do we struggle to delegate because we don't think we can trust anybody? If the answer is yes, then deep down, maybe there's a need to be needed. Maybe there's a belief that the only way we know how to feel valuable is if we are needed and doing quote unquote something. So I would walk Emily through something that I pick up from acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's called values clarification. So, like the King of Pentacles in the reverse position, Emily is kind of thinking that her value is coming from needing to care for others. But if we dig deeper, we can discover that her actual value is connection. So she's been pursuing connection, right? Through exhaustion, through overworking, through making herself indispensable. But the King of Pentacles reverse advises us that there's some scarcity mindset here. The belief that love and connection are so scarce that the only way she can gain them is through depleting herself, like fully self-abandoning. So let's go ahead and reframe this entire dynamic with a little more modern psychology. And of course, we're going to keep the tarot lens here. So the Queen of Pentacles at her core represents a regulated nervous system. I talk about nervous system stuff a lot in my work because it's really, really important. It's not about having a perfect regulated nervous system all the time, but it is about having a regulated enough nervous system so that when you're out of your window of tolerance, whether you're escalated or you're feeling really lethargic, you're able to bring yourself into a state of balance. So you're not constantly in fight, flight, or freeze. You're actually in a state of comfort and rest. That should be what your base level is. I'm going to talk about the polyvagal theory. This was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. So he talks about the state of calm, social connection when we're feeling grounded. That's really where we want to be. Again, not living in fight or flight. So the King of Pentacles in the reverse position, by comparison, he's living in a fight or flight because he's in a controlling mode. So the reverse king has those scarcity patterns. We could even say there might be some freezing or some fawning in that scarcity patterning as well. But the Queen of Pentacles is exactly where Dr. Stephen Porges talks about that state of calm, social connection, feeling safe and feeling grounded, otherwise known as just being present. When we understand abundance in this way, being regulated enough to enjoy what we have, there is so much in your life that will shift. The Queen of Pentacles becomes a somatic practice more than just the tarot archetype of the mother, of the nurturing one. Going back to something Jessica Dora says in her book, Tarot for Change, one thing she says about the Queen is that true nurturing requires containment. And I think about the garden that she's in, right? She says that you don't just scatter seeds everywhere and hope for the best that they grow. You create beds and borders and structures that hold and contain the growth. The Queen of Pentacles is the gardener of her psyche. In the internal family systems therapy model, or IFS, we talk about the self, which is the core centered part of us that can hold all of our other parts with compassion. When we're in our self, we can see a part of us that might be becoming escalated, okay, or going into freeze or going into fawn. And we can hold those parts of us, the freeze, the fawn, whatever else is there, with compassion. But we need to be in that self, that core, that centered part of us first. The Queen of Pentacles, she's representing the self in action. She can hold space for others because she holds a space for herself first. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the Six of Wands is our outcome card for September. It's what we're going towards. So, traditionally, this card will represent victory, recognition, success, all the things we love, all the things we want. But we're going to take it in context with the Queen of Pentacles journey and, of course, the reversed King of Pentacles. The victory actually isn't about conquering or competing. It's the victory of integrating this energy. So when we integrate the Queen's groundedness with the lessons learned from that scarcity patterning, we achieve something really wonderful. And it is the ability to succeed without sacrificing ourselves. We find that perfect balance of knowing, okay, I'm going to give, but I'm also going to make sure that I don't deplete myself. And isn't that lovely that we have that choice? We have that option, but we have to learn that we have that option. And we do our learning best when we have tools to practice with. So, the first tool I'm going to give you is just a daily practice that you can tap into. So, each morning, before you give your energy away to everybody else and everything, okay, I want you to sit with your hands on your belly, maybe close your eyes, kind of tune out some of that external noise. The Queen of Pentacles has her hand near her belly because she's holding that pentacle. So put your hands on your belly and take 5 deep breaths, feeling your hands rise and fall. This is a small way to acknowledge yourself before you get caught up in the wildness of your day. As you breathe, I want you to ask yourself, what am I cultivating today? And think about that garden. I don't want you to say, what am I doing? What am I giving? I want you to ask, what am I cultivating? The Queen of Pentacles is always cultivating presence, abundance, and groundedness. So she is mirroring back to you what you have the capacity to do for yourself. Make that part of your morning practice. It's a daily thing. It's so important to check in with yourself, to start your day off by acknowledging you. Another action step you can take is doing a resource inventory. So, with the King of Pentacles reverse, we're going to take him and use him as our teacher here. We're actually not conscious of our resources because we're in that fight or flight. We're in some sort of like automatic reactive state where we're hoarding or we're just like hemorrhaging, all of our energy. And in order to get out of that automatic giving or hoarding, we need to bring consciousness to it. There's 5 resources you have. You can list them on a piece of paper so that way you can stay on track. You have your physical, which is like your health, your time, your energy. You have your emotional. So this is your capacity for connection, your empathy, which, they don't run constant all the time. You're going to have limits. Same thing goes for mental. Okay, that's the third thing on the list of 5. This is your focus, your creativity, your problem solving. And then you have the fourth, your spiritual, your sense of purpose, your connection to something greater, if that's your vibe, or just like larger than you. And then the fifth thing is your material. So your actual money, possessions, skills. And then you're going to rate each of these resources from 1 to 10. And think about it like 1 as the tank is very low and 10 is the tank is full. Where are you the lowest and where are you the highest? And see where you can give a little bit, but also see where you need to protect something that you just don't have the energy to really give. You don't have to be at 0. You don't even have to be at 1. Maybe you need to spend a little time restoring your mental energy, and maybe it can just sit at a 2. Maybe it can stay at a 2 for weeks, and that's okay. I learned this particular resource inventory from a mentor of mine, and she really encouraged me to check in with myself and get really, really real. Okay. She challenged me a lot, but I was doing this thing where like I was assuming that I had the energy. And that was me being on the go. That was me being caught up in that automatic fight, flight, freeze. I didn't slow down enough to actually challenge myself. And so she challenged me to do it. She challenged me not to assume that I had the energy, but to slow down and actually assess each of these areas and where my energy levels were. And then from that place, advocate for myself, set up boundaries, and do my best because I want to acknowledge all the parents out there, all the students out there, really anybody listening, because life is hard for all of us on the planet. There will be times when it is more difficult than others to restore your energy. There will be times where you do have to give to other people and you're already at a one in your mental tank and advocating for yourself. You can say, hey, you know what? I'm running really low mentally right now, struggling with problem solving. I'm going to give this my best, though. This is the point. It's to do your best. It's not to have all five resources at 10 all the time. It is just to acknowledge where you're at and clarify that with the people around you. Again, advocate for yourself the best you can and do the best you can. And this shifts us into something else I really hope that you take with you throughout this month. The Queen of Pentacles knows something that the reversed King of Pentacles doesn't know. Okay. The King of Pentacles reversed, in his effort to control, has some interesting beliefs about perfection. But the Queen of Pentacles upright, she's not holding on to that. There's somebody named Donald Winnicott who is very influential in psychology. And there's a concept that he coined called being the good enough caregiver. It originated as the good enough mother, but we can kind of take the mother language out of it and understand caregiver. Um, and so we're going to talk about being the good enough caregiver. But first, going back to the Queen of Pentacles' main energy, it is about being good enough for ourselves first before we can be good enough for others. Okay. And this doesn't mean that they're like judging us as to whether or not you're good enough to take care of them. What I'm talking about here is something a little deeper than that. In the show notes, there are some links that will give you a better understanding of Donald Winnicott's good enough caregiver theory. But in short, it means that you don't have to be a perfect caregiver. You just need to be attuned most of the time. And you need to be this way with yourself and with your own nervous system. So, in order to have secure attachment, you need to be securely attached to yourself. You need to have a secure relationship with your own nervous system. So, like, there are different types of attachment styles. You may or may not know this, but if you have ever been to therapy, you've probably been asked some questions that will help you better understand your attachment style. And once you've locked that in, then you basically know the attachment style you have to your own nervous system. And since here, doesn't matter where we're coming from, we're aiming for good enough, we're aiming for secure. I want you to choose one area where you tend to overgive or be perfect. And you can use that resources scale to kind of help you gauge where you're overgiving. It's probably where you're most depleted and where the most ones or zeros show up on that particular resource list. This week, I want you to practice only giving 80% instead of the 120 that you give. And I want you to notice what happens when you give only 80%. I want you to notice who still loves you. I want you to notice who still cares about you. I want you to notice how the world doesn't actually end when you give 80 instead of 120. This is how we retrain our nervous system to understand that we don't have to earn worth through depletion. Maybe you need to play that back again and let that kind of sit with you, but I think it's going to help you out. Let's tie in some of that Six of Wands energy. Close your eyes and imagine yourself at the end of the day where you've maintained your healthy boundaries. You've nurtured yourself and other people, but the difference is like you stayed grounded in your worth. I want you to feel how good that is for you. Like that's a moment of victory. That is absolutely something worth celebrating. It's not about like conquering your to-do list and checking off all the boxes. It's a victory in staying centered, in saying, oh, you know what? I didn't get to those 10 other things, but I didn't deplete myself trying. That's good enough. I would rather see, for example, my emotional energy number at a 3 instead of it at a 1 where it's been for several months. So This is the reframing we do when the Queen of Pentacles is showing up for us. I'm going to recap a few key takeaways from the Queen of Pentacles journey. True abundance, it's not about having more, it's about being present with what you have and preserving what you have from a fair and balanced place. You deserve to be fair and balanced with yourself first. You deserve self-respect. Wealth is in all forms here. It's what we're talking about. You don't have to be grasping at things, and you don't have to be careless with your energy either. You can be present with it. When you notice your scarcity patterns or your controlling tendencies or the fears, about your resources, and those can be other people's love, time, and attention, all those things. Look, the scarcity pattern, it's just a teacher. It's that King of Pentacles in the reverse position saying, hey, you're doing that thing again where you're trying to control and you're trying to be perfect, but you don't have to, because you don't have to stay in this space. You have choices. And the Six of Wands, that energy is about aligning with your values. Remember that Pentacle is not just about the external values, it's about the internal ones. Nurturing without depleting yourself. Let that be your value. Let success be something that is felt inside of you and embodied instead of something that's like a trophy on a shelf to show off. So we're really talking about a lot of practice this month, not so much the performance aspect of things. Be generous, be boundaried. You can be nurturing and nourished. You can be successful and sustained. That is the earth element in the Queen of Pentacles. Going back to that garden, it's not bearing fruit every season of the year. It has seasons of bearing fruit, but it's not every season. You don't have to be bearing fruit every season. You don't have to be giving out your energy every moment of the day. You don't have to earn your abundance. You don't have to deplete yourself to be valuable. You're already there. You're already the Queen of Pentacles. She's here to invite you to remember who you are and to practice being that person. But your worth is inside you for you to explore, for you to claim, and for you to nourish. And that is the end of our episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Don't forget, I've got resources linked for anybody who listened. The resources, though, one of them is the Tarot for Change book that I mentioned by Jessica Dior. There's 78 Degrees of Tarot Wisdom, another book that I use by Rachel Pollack. I didn't reference it, but it's still just a great book to have on hand. There's the Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, something I mentioned, Polyvagal Theory, IFS Theory, the Good Enough Caretaker, and then the Polyvagal Theory. So there's actually a podcast, another podcast I'm going to recommend called the Being Well podcast, where Stephen Porges is actually interviewed. And I think it's really worth listening to because he talks about the Polyvagal Theory for trauma. And share this episode with somebody that you know will benefit from it. If you feel like it, I would really appreciate a 5-star review because it helps my podcast grow and it helps people find me that will also benefit from this blend of modern psychology and tarot. Until next time, take the best care of yourself. Bye.